Growing up, my favorite way to learn about paranormal stories was by my father reading to me or going and listening to people share their stories. So that later, when I became a teenager, one of my most hyper-focused things was researching areas' history and their haunted stories. And so then, when I had the opportunity to travel all over the United States, I made a point, if I could, to go join either like the standard tour or the haunted tour, or there was a few times I was able to join a paranormal group. My favorite thing afterwards, everybody would sit around and share their experiences, or memories would come up from times before, or maybe stories that were told to them from other people that had been in the area. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun, since I have been doing this off and on throughout my life, that I would create a little playlist and kind of share my stories. So I'm doing this in the vein of the way things were once upon a time, where it wasn't so much about proving it and documenting it. It's for the sheer joy of sharing the story. So as we are approaching the end of October and Samhain or Halloween or whatever word you want to call it, I thought this was the perfect time of the year to start this little playlist, and I would probably add to it throughout the year whenever I'm inspired to share one of my stories, but I thought that I would share at least a couple a week as we are leading up to the end of the month. So here we go. So in 1991, my friends and I were in San Francisco, and I pulled them across the bay to Alcatraz Island. It's such an iconic place when you are growing up in California. It's like one of the top places that are haunted. And so they agreed to go with me. The day started off really perfect for this. It was really foggy, and you could hear the seals that are usually covering all of the docks. You could hear seagulls. The water was choppy, and so it had that kind of eerie, we're gonna go do something haunted today kind of feel. So we jumped on the ferry, and by the time we made it over to the island, most of that fog had kind of dissipated. And it was still kind of hazy, but the fog would have been awesome exploring Alcatraz Island. At that time in 1991, I don't know if they still do this, but they would give you a Walkman with a tape that had like a guided tour on it and headphones. Basically, you would walk around in your group and listen to the audio tour, and then there were like stationed staff that were dressed up in like I guess the prison guard uniforms, and they would kind of guide you, help you if you had questions, if you need to know where the bathroom was or whatever. So you start off in the visitors area and you get your audio tour thing, and then as a group you just kind of walk around and kind of do it at your own pace. Pause it when you want to, play when you want to, whatever. And so we spent most of the time looking at the time, dilapidated buildings. So you had like all the different houses for the people that had worked Alcatraz Prison, and then like the warden's house, and there had like a little store and all these kind of things. And what was really cool for me, growing up, my father was a huge supporter of the AIM movement, and to go to this place and see where they had occupied Alcatraz, and there were still remnants of that, was really cool for me to see. I don't know if that's still there. So we eventually made it into the prison. We started down the cell blocks, looking at all the different cells, listening to the different stories. You would hear like different voices that were reenacting the stories of the inmates, and I think even quoting them. I'm not sure on that. But we're walking around, we're exploring this, and the thing that really got me was the prison had this like smell that was really unique. It was this combination of like wet cement and like metal and ocean, and I really felt that that's probably the way it always has smelt when the prisoners were there and etc. And it had this like, with that mistiness in the air and everything, it really does set off this atmosphere that is quite unique. But I really wasn't experiencing anything haunted. There was a couple cell blocks that I was aware of that were known for being haunted, and I really didn't feel anything there. But it was an interesting building, interesting stories. And so we're just kind of enjoying the day, walking around. We are walking through the prison, and eventually we make it to cell block A. And I wasn't really paying attention. I was mostly looking upwards towards this like metal staircase that I think went up to the third floor, or maybe it was like a catwalk that went outside. I don't know. But we were walking towards these huge windows that were covered with like metal grating, and my friends were ahead of me. I was following them, and we went to turn left to go down cell block A, and we had to go through this like giant fenced in kind of doorway. And as I stepped underneath it, like over the threshold into cell block A, I had everything changed. So far that day, everything's really chill, fun, interesting. And then all of a sudden, I felt sick to the stomach. I felt like my feet were like made of lead, like I didn't want to walk forward. And I started feeling dizzy and disoriented, and almost as if the corner of my eyes, like my vision went kind of gray and fuzzy and a little dark, and I felt dizzy. So I ended up like leaning over towards the wall, which was to my right, under these big windows. On my left is all of the cells. And in front of me, all I can see is this giant metal spiral staircase. And I'm thinking, okay, there is probably like a residue energy, or maybe one of the cell blocks here is the one that's haunted, and maybe I'm confused. Because for me at this time, these are like kind of my standard kind of something's going on here, or maybe I need to eat a sandwich. I don't know. One or the other. So I'm trying to get grounded. I'm trying to stay focused. And I remember walking along the wall, looking up the spiral staircase, and thinking it probably had something to do with the staircase. And as I'm walking like beside the metal staircase, I'm feeling more and more sick. And I feel like I'm trying to get away from the cell blocks or away from something, but I'm like walking along almost against this wall. And then I realize that there's this like staircase that is surrounded by like a half cement wall that kind of came up to your waist. And there's this little door that led down, and it was locked. And I suddenly realized that all of my sensations when I put my eyes on the staircase going down, all of my sensations magnified. I felt sick. My feet felt like they were really heavy, and I had the sensation to run away. I didn't. I just stood there trying to understand what was going on. And my friends were like going into the cells and just kind of hanging out and making jokes and goofing off as they do. And I'm now hyper-focused on this staircase going down into like complete darkness. So you can like see over, the wall is only up to your waist. So you can look down it. You just couldn't go down there because it had that little door. And I'm starting to hear what sounds like a whimpering or like a cry, but like it's muffled, like if you put your hand over your mouth and made like noises. And I can't tell if it's part of the audio, which I realize now, like I'm actually not really listening to. And so I turn off the audio tape to hear the sound. I didn't hear it. And I thought, okay, is it like the seals outside, or is it seagulls, or is it like the ocean hitting the rocks, or like something? And I'm listening to all the different things, and I couldn't really hear it again. I turned the music back on, or the audio back on. I mean, not music, the audio tour. I turn it back on. I'm listening, and it's talking about the cells, and then I'm hearing this whining, crying again, but now it's starting to sound like yelling and crying and screaming, and like someone's being hurt or tortured. And I'm looking at my friends who are not being affected by this at all. You can tell that they're not hearing what I'm hearing. And so I kind of stay really quiet, and I'm leaning against the wall, kind of halfway down the center of where the staircase would go down. So there's like the wall that goes, like the exterior wall, a little pathway, the staircase down, a little pathway, and then the prison cells. And I'm leaning against, kind of hugging the wall halfway, like by the stairs, and I feel like I can't move anymore. And so at the end of the hallway, I didn't notice him. There was a guard, and he had been watching us. There was nobody else on the cell block except for us. And so he noticed us, and he walked over, and he was asking me like roughly like, how are you doing? Are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. And I feel kind of awkward. Like, do I say something? Do I not say something? Do I ask him if like this place is haunted, like this area? Because nothing in the story is saying anything about it other than the fact that A block is like the oldest part of the prison. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's just like really old residual or something. So the guard comments on the fact that I'm like looking down the stairs a lot and that I'm not looking very well. And he was like, so maybe, do you want to go down there with me? And I'm like, no. But my friends were like, oh yeah, we want to go down. And so he ends up taking them down. I said, I don't want to go. I stay up there. He says, as long as I stay right there, he was fine with it. He takes them down there. I can hear them like chatting for a few moments. And their voices sound present and like echoey, but underneath it, I could still hear what sounded like a man was like screaming and crying. It was like this back and forth sound of cries and screams. And it was really, 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 really freaky. The sensation of feeling sick to my stomach and like my feet being heavy, the headache. I distinctly remember the way that I couldn't like get my eyesight to go normal. It was almost like the sides of my eyes were like dark or something. It was very strange. I rarely have experienced this since then. So the guard comes back up. And my friends are laughing, whatever. I'm still hearing this sound, and the guard is like focused on me. And he goes, so what's going on? Like, what are you experiencing? And I'm still like a little weird to say anything because I don't want to be seen as, crazy or whatnot. And he goes, so do you know about this area? And I'm like, well, no, like Alcatraz, He's like, no, like downstairs, that's the entrance to the old fort. I was like, the what? Because I'm thinking like Alcatraz was always an island that was turned into a prison. I was wrong. So he goes to tell me that before Alcatraz was the prison, it was a fort. Back when, like, during the California American-Mexican wars, and then like the area, so the indigenous folk were taken and imprisoned, and other people from like ships were taken and imprisoned also. There's a lot of maritime stories connected to San Francisco. And so this fort used to be a place that they would imprison people. And he wouldn't tell me like the things that went on, but he was telling me that under the prison is the foundation of the fort. And it's where like the dungeons were, that was part of the fort. So that freaked me out. And I told the guard then that I feel like I'm hearing someone like crying and like someone in pain. And he goes, yep, that's been reported. So the guard offered to walk us back to the visitors area where the ferry was. He could tell I was a bit shooken up after he shared what that area was. And all along the way back, he was sharing stories from when he actually had been a guard before Alcatraz had closed. And he shared that a lot of the inmates and a lot of the guards had very strange stories involving those stairs and the spiral staircase going up. That they would hear people coming up and down the metal staircase, and that they would see strange lights coming from the basement area. And so I was so happy to be out of there. Even to this day, when I think about this story, my memory pulls back, like the way it smelled, the way I felt, how scared I felt, And I can still kind of hear, like my memory has really stored the way that that sound was coming from downstairs. All these years later, it was like it happened a couple weeks ago. On the ferry ride back, I asked my friends if they had experienced anything. They all made jokes of it, but no one else experienced anything. And it was just an interesting day that has led to some interesting memories and probably a place that I don't ever want to go back to ever again. So that is my Alcatraz story. It's kind of short and simple. It's basically just that one experience. As I said, the rest of the day was really kind of chill and relaxing and more on the interesting, like learning history and learning about the way the Alcatraz ran, especially the little village that was part of the island. So years later, when I look back on this, I wonder what exactly happened to me. For me, that moment happened, it felt like it was like 20, 30 minutes, but in reality, it was like only a minute. And I know that my friends didn't even notice it, but then I've always been a little weird. And I've always been the one that when I get overwhelmed or overstimulated, I've always hung back from my group of friends. It's something I still do today, and they just kind of know that that's what I do. So I love looking at old stories from my youth and kind of bringing in the things that I understand through experience today and reanalyze it. So I think that I became aware, just as anybody can, of a memory bubble from the past. And it's like an imprint or a really strong residue energy that isn't something that's going to dissipate over time. I think that there's certain energies that, like planetary energies or earth energies or any of those different kinds of resonating energies that allow certain memory bubbles to become stronger and weaker, depending on what is going on in the world. So that is my theory, and everything is a learning process. Everything is about experience, and everything is about curiosity. So thanks for hanging out and listening to my Alcatraz story. Hopefully you're having a beautiful day or a night, and as always, happy witching.